exchange of views with our MEPs, and we start with Nicolina Brunjak for the EPP.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here today with us. I fully and strongly support the plan's four-pillar approach. First of all, for boosting supply, then mobilizing investments, then enabling reforms and supporting the ones the most affected. However, I would like to stress 2 points. First, investments and loan will not be sufficient, as you said, if we mobilize unprecedented public and private resources under the current and the next MFF. We must also tackle the structural drivers of the crisis. I therefore welcome the proposed Affordable Housing Plan Act, and I hope that it is going to help local authorities to identify drivers of the crisis and to find the most appropriate answer to them. And I also welcome the Commission's intention to present a legislative initiative on short-term rentals as a part of Affordable Housing Act. And I believe that this will be really important. So, because of the legal certainty and EU framework for data collection, the coherent single market framework are essential to support local authorities, protecting housing affordability, and to ensure the fair competition. And to ensure full implementation and having in mind importance, as you said, of the functioning of the single market, it is also important to have act on affordable housing. So can you tell us more about the type and the content of the future act, if you have some kind of envisioned? And second, the implementation will be critical, but it lies primarily with the member states. My question, therefore, is for how the Commission intends to support incentivize and guide member states to ensure that the plans translate into concrete housing projects on the ground, projects and models capable to answer on this crisis project and that make difference. And lastly, I want to point out that announced housing simplification package in 2027 is crucial in order to see faster building of housing across the European Union. So can you tell us a bit more about the upcoming housing simplification package? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Andreas Scheder for SND.
Thank you, President, and Happy New Year, everybody, and especially to our Commissioner. Thank you also for presenting at the end of last year the Affordable Housing Plan. I think this is extremely important to start this debate. And as I said in the plenary, it is only, let's say, the beginning of our work together with all the other stakeholders and communities to fight for affordable housing. Today, I wanted to raise one issue because you're speaking about also boosting the housing supply. And the one is mobilizing money for new construction. The other pillar must be also to mobilize for renovation, and especially for renovation, which is, let's say, keeping people living there where they live. So the idea is also to have it updated and accessible for everyone, like in the form of a new EU renovation loan, I don't know, maybe by the EIB or others, with clear social criteria also to deliver a renovation wave. This is not only about housing, it's also about the cost of living and energy, because the better it's renovated, of course, also the heating and these issues become better. And it's also a tool to protect low-income households for displacement, because I think this must be important when we speak about renovation, not this kind of gentrification where people have to move out and others come in, but to keep people also living there, but on a better standard. So this is also a point additionally to the point which you mentioned and which I think we have to focus in the future. And I would be pleased to listen what's your opinion on this.
Now, after these first two interventions, I give back the floor to the Commissioner for 4 minutes, and then we have another round.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you for both the questions and the ideas. I'm also eager to see what your own internal negotiations in this committee will lead to. And I probably should have said this in my initial statement, but it's clear that even though this is the Commission's plan, this is my plan, this doesn't mean that we are not open to other ideas. So please, I know you will not hold back, but certainly I will not encourage you to hold back either. Put forward still all of the good ideas that you have. So on the Affordable Housing Act, it's an attempt to find a way to have a legislative vehicle to make sure that you can actually take action against short-term rentals where they are a problem without harming also the cities and regions in which it is of benefits. And to make it more complex, very often probably in most cities it'll be both a benefit and a problem. So how do we do it? Well, instead of saying you need to do this or you need to do that or you cannot do this, you cannot do that, what we want to do is define some criteria under which we can define especially stressed areas. So if you are a housing stressed area, you will then get a toolbox of things that you can do. So there's an element, of course, of sharing of best practices because some of these things are already taking place. But there's also a guarantee that we don't face the problems that we have to be honest and say that we have now, where in fact it's European Union internal market rules that are preventing local authorities from taking action. So our idea is to say that if you are if you do have a stressed housing area like this, then you will have the legal right to use these measures. Apart from that, we also want to look at permitting. How can we facilitate faster, easier permitting? We want to look at simplification, cutting the red tape. I thought this would be an easier exercise when we started discussing this just over a year ago. I thought we would already have a long list of things that we could just get away with. But as with everything, it's not as simple as you think. So we have to make a very thorough analysis. But there is possibility to do things better. It's not only in the permitting remit that we usually point to. There are also a lot of other areas where I think we can simplify and cut red tape. Again, this is one of the areas where you are very, very welcome to give us good ideas. We have, of course, already gotten a lot of input in the process before of public consultation before our plan, but there is a need to take a deeper analysis of these things. On the renovation loans, this is certainly something that we hope can be a part of the pan-European investment platform. I think it's a very important point. I was personally surprised when I found out how high the number was of homes that are not inhabited, 20%. So we need houses in Europe, but every fifth house is empty. This is a very good place to start. Also, something that happens a lot in the country that I know best, but that unfortunately happens in most European countries, I'm afraid I have to say, is that perfectly good houses are torn down to build new. Why? Is it because it's the best for sustainability or economy? Or no, it's simply just because they want something more modern, or that's the trend. I don't know if some of you have had the chance to follow some of the social media accounts that are there that take this as their credo to stop the demolition of perfectly good houses. When you look at them, they will give you examples of beautiful, yes, old, but very sustainable houses that are, some of them don't even really need to be renovated. Some of them do need a little bit of renovation, but they're just torn down for the sake of just the taste of new owners that wants a new house. Now, for sustainability reasons, for our ability to have enough supply of both workers that are skilled and building construction material, that is obviously not sustainable either. So let's have a look at that also. Thank you.
Now I give the floor to Antonella Sberna for ECR.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome back, Commissioner. Thank you very much for coming back to speak to us and for giving us an opportunity to look more in depth at the document that you presented in December. The plan that you presented is a series of ideas, projects, good intentions to strengthen coordination, to provide greater flexibility. But it's a self-implementing instrument. So for member states, we're really more looking at the framework that would be available for it. And it's difficult to use the financial tools that are available. So you have to decide between how quickly you want to go or whether you want to go slower. And so this brings me on to the comments that I wanted to make. One, in terms of content, the distinction between social housing and affordable housing. Social housing has a clear legal basis. It's for the most marginalised people who otherwise wouldn't have access to the market. And as this committee requested in lengthy discussions, you've suggested broadening this to affordable housing. These are sometimes middle-class families who wouldn't currently be covered by social housing, but still can't afford market rates. And of course, it's correct to respect the principle of subsidiarity and allow member states to define who would have access to it. But in allowing member states to exercise this, it's important to ensure that the EU ensures that there is proper access to stable state aid to ensure both public and private investment in this. And the second comment I wanted to make was about genuine mobilisation of resources. Yes, the EIB, cohesion funds are important tools, but simplification, certainty about timescales, these are not merely secondary, but they're absolutely essential to ensure proper supply. So my questions are, how does the Commission intend to properly provide support for member states in properly implementing state aid to ensure that they can move forward with this? And what type of flexibility measures and simplification measures do you intend to introduce to ensure authorisations and a reasonable time frame for use of the funds? Thank you.
To Karen Malloly for Renew.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. And let me say, firstly, I look forward to your visit to Dublin for the summit, the first housing summit, and I really look forward to discussing the issues on the ground with you. Commissioner, like many of our colleagues, I welcome this initiative, particularly the initiative to cut red tape and boost supply, reduce energy bills for households, and mobilising public and private investments. Two issues since December have been on my mind. How is he really going to tackle, how is he really going to legislate with regard to the issue of short-term rentals? And you've given us a bit more detail today. You're looking at the stress zones. You've hands up, we can't touch the overall, we can't ban, but you're looking at specific categories. And I'm still wondering how you're going to legislate across member states to be able to do this. I welcome it because I think we need a focus in some areas. And even in parts of the western seaboard of Ireland, as I've said many times at this committee, where local people cannot buy homes, but people with the richest of this world can come in and buy derelict properties and set up B&Bs under Booking.com or Airbnb, etc. It's most unfair. The other one that catches my eye is Action 7. Perhaps not so positive about this one. I was one of the people who asked you to go after the vulture funds, Commissioner, to really try and be a bit more aggressive on this. I have to say I don't see that in the suggestions and in the action plan. I see an awful lot of analysis and greater transparency and peer learning, but I don't see anything with teeth to take them on, and I'm disappointed you haven't taken them on in many respects. You asked for ideas. You asked for real ideas. So I'm going to give you one. Over Christmas, I had an opportunity to look at a proposal for a new green village in the Irish Midlands. Ballymore Investments, a busy London developer coming in, a developer that has transformed the old London Docklands, by the way, building 7,000 homes across Royal Wharf, Goodluck, Hope and City Island in London. It's coming into the Irish Midlands saying they want to tackle this from the perspective of a green city. He's calling it a 15-minute city with a potential population to grow over 4 times what it is at the moment. It's 23,000 people at the moment. And he talks, I rang him up and I said, this sounds terrific. What's the key to it? He said, in London, I had one-stop shop. I said, what do you mean? One agency dealt with me on the land access. One agency dealt with me on the planning and the permits. One agency dealt with me on the putting in the water and wastewater facilities. That was the key to the situation. Not 10 agencies, not 15 agencies. I don't know how, Commissioner, you can work with our agencies and our ex-member states in achieving that. But I believe the man. I believe from his experience, we must simplify the process if we're going to take this issue by the scruff of the neck and achieve at the end of the day. I wish you well. I look forward to seeing you in Dublin and we'll make more progress.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
So, let me start with with the last idea on the one-stop shops. This is an idea that we also know from other sectors. So in the energy sector that I'm also responsible for, some countries, including the one that I know best, have this idea implemented when applying for an offshore wind farm, for instance. So instead of having to get 27 different permits, this is just an arbitrary number, but a lot of different permits from a lot of different authorities with a lot of different contract people, and then one timeline doesn't follow the other, you call one office. I have heard the idea also mentioned before with regard to housing, but I did not know of the example that you mentioned from London. Was it? We will certainly look into that and see if it's something we can learn from, an idea that we can also maybe see if can be implemented in Europe. Probably there are also already good examples in our own union. Let's look at that. I do like that idea because sometimes we also do make the mistake of saying, oh, it's all of those complicated rules and it's the EU is to blame, and sometimes that's right, but other times it's also because of the whole institutional setup makes things extremely complicated. When one authority has to deal with another authority, with a third and a fourth and a fifth, obviously it takes time. So I very much like that idea. On the speculation, well, I look forward to seeing what will come out of this committee and your report, because I think probably that is the theme where I've seen most disagreement in this House, at least. And we don't really seem to agree either on the analysis. I think I'm probably closest to the ones of you who see a very real problem here. I would be surprised if our analysis does not show that there is a lot of speculation going on here. On the other hand, I have to acknowledge that we don't really have the transparency and the overview to prove this yet. Again, then I will also say that there are others arguing, no, this is the free market, it's working perfect, there's no problem. Well, if that is the case, then our analysis will show that. So I hope that no matter which side of the fence you're on here, you will all support us having more transparency and having more analysis, because that will shed light to what is indeed needed to be done. It's probably also clear then when we propose, after having the analysis, propose solutions that some might be European, but many of them will be national. For instance, when it comes to taxation, very often tax instruments will be the most efficient ones. And not that the European Union couldn't in theory apply them, but you also know how difficult that would be. Unanimity and very difficult. So probably to be realistic, most of those things would need to be done on national level. But I'm very willing to discuss it all. On the short-term rentals, yes, so there's not much else I can add from what I said before. It's about making these criteria for stressed housing areas and then making it possible to act within these areas. We do think that's a pretty good idea, and it will give the tools that many of the mayors that I've met with have asked about. And I do also appreciate the point that this is not just something for Amsterdam and Barcelona and Copenhagen. It's also for smaller cities. So that needs to be taken into account. On the questions on the state aid, I think you've had the opportunity also to discuss this with my colleague, Executive Vice President Rebecca. I'm sure she'll also be happy to discuss it further with you. I do think that the proposal as it stands now is very good, because it means that not that we are no longer talking about social housing as such. Of course, that is still extremely important, and I would be happy to see more social housing. But it's important that you can also, as a state, support affordable housing that is not directed specifically at only the most vulnerable parts of your population. It's also needed for more affordable housing, and I think we will secure that with the proposal that we will put forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Gordon Bozanac for the Greens.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Commissioner. Happy New Year to everyone. Actually, I will, as Greens, we did welcome the plan, and we see really some good directions, but also we still have some worries about the plan. And let me today stress maybe a few of them. First is the question, actually, how many the member states will actually implement the plan, because we don't see it. So if you have any information up to now, for example, how many member states actually have been using the cohesion policy to reschedule the policy and then to invest the money in the house, do you know that? Because we're also waiting for Mr. Fito to give us this data on the first REGI meeting. But that will be one indicator how member states are ready or not ready. The second, I also have to go to these things on speculation, and I do hear your arguments and your worries. But please, you are Commissioner, and be resistant to the political games we are having in the Parliament. There are some independent experts, and I see that you also want to see more knowledge, more expertise on this to make decisions. But why I think it's so important to have decisions on speculation, because the money already starts to float to the member states. And if we will not have safeguards to protect this money from speculation, we will make the same mistake again. I will just give one example from my country, Croatia. The government now proposed a new measure to mobilize the empty stocks, because also in Croatia, in my city, Zagreb, 55,000 empty flats are there. So how the government wants to mobilize this empty stock? In a way to avoid the owners by temporarily rebuying these flats from them and then putting them on the rent market. So the persons who were responsible to keep empty flats for years now have opportunity to get 30,000 euros to temporarily be let to the government, who will then let it under affordable price to the tenants. So this is, I think, a dangerous thing, and I wouldn't like to see European money goes through the government to those owners who've been keeping the empty flats for many, many years. So this is just one of the examples how we really have to build in good safeguards not to misuse the public money that ends up again in the private pockets, on those pockets who were actually responsible for this crisis. So my appeal and the question to you is, how can we really ensure that the investments which will start to flow will not make more damage again? So I know it's a hard one, but please keep it in mind. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Leila Chaibi for the left.
Merci. Bonne année à tous. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm going to speak French. The first question, hopefully you've got your headphones on now. So I want to talk about the reform on state aid and the rules underpinning that. In France, we have a particular concern with social donors. Our system in France is that we have specific owners who run social housing for non-profit purposes. So there is a concern that by introducing more affordable housing, there will be less money available for social housing. I looked at the Commission document and I looked at your definition of affordable housing, and you indicate within that definition that it is possible to use reliable indicators to decide what is a affordable housing. So ratio between rent and the ratio between rent and your wage, credit and wage. So do you think 25% is the right ratio? 25% of your wage going to housing. Is that right or not? You know, 25% of 1,000 euros, that's 250 euros. And then you haven't got much money left then, but compare that to someone who earns 10,000 euros a month and spends the same proportion on their rent. So maybe I could put my question to you in a different way. You know, are you not just going to look at the ratio, but also look at how much money is left over once that person has paid their rent? And then the housing simplification package. The housing simplification package. Does it just simplify building permits? Okay, that would be okay. But could you provide some reassurance? In shadow meetings, under Mr. Jimenez's leadership, we're hearing some concerning things. So could you provide some reassurance? Because we're hearing in some quarters that you want to make changes to some environmental directives, including the birds directives, which apparently stops the building of houses, and the EPBD directive could potentially be undone as well. So will you provide some reassurance there that those directives are not going to be altered?
Thank you very much. Now, the last intervention for this part, Irmit Bosdorf for ESN.
Ja, vielen Dank, Herr Jørgensen. Das uns heute
Thank you, Mr. Jørgensen, for answering our questions here today. I've got a couple for you. You mentioned private investors. How are they supposed to be able to create affordable housing? Construction costs have skyrocketed, as you well know. What incentive is there for private investors to build for rent? Then, short-term rentals, you mentioned. That's something we could do in summer and then rent out to students. Could we get more information on that? What are those students going to do in summer? You mentioned there's a lot of empty housing, 20%, buildings being torn down and new builds. Why? Well, because you quite simply can't sell buildings that have oil heatings in Europe because the banks won't back it. So what are your plans? How are you going to deal with the housing shortage? Maybe we should roll back some of the regulation. And that's also tied in with construction regulation. We created a significant number of jobs last year just to be able to implement regulation. So I wanted to hear from you, how would you envisage effective implementation?
Thank you. Commissioner, you have the floor.
Thank you all. So one of the things that we found out in our analysis was that indeed it is quite difficult to use one-size-fits-all definitions of, for instance, what is affordable housing in Europe, since it differs from country to country, where living expenses are different, where salaries are different, house prices are different, rents are different, mortgages are different. Nonetheless, I think it's fair to say that I haven't yet visited a country or spoken to representatives from any member states where we don't have what I would consider a housing crisis. It's bigger in some countries than others, but we do have it in all countries. We've been careful not to set one definition of what is affordable housing that would be a one-size-fits-all, because we think that that would actually give a misleading picture. Nonetheless, of course, there are some legalistic wording that needs to be in place for this to work with regards to the state aid rules when we put forward the proposal. And again, I think it's fair to say also that my colleague Teresa Ribera is obviously much more of an expert on this than I am. But what we have aimed to do here is to find a way that will indeed fulfill the ask from member states, which is to make sure that state aid money can indeed be used for affordable housing, not only for strict social housing. That is very important to say. That does not mean that we do not support social housing and we want less social housing. On the contrary, in many countries it would be good to have more social housing. But that is, of course, at the end of the day up to the member states. How much do they want? I personally hope and think and will do whatever I can to facilitate that we have more both social housing and affordable housing. On the fact that there are buildings being used, houses being used for speculative reasons only, empty houses. If people can make more money, the speculators can make more money just having them empty, and then they will do it. Well, there is one easy solution. Tax, you say. Yeah, well, I wouldn't consider that easy, but that is also a solution. So you can make it a legislative requirement that somebody has to live in a home. The city that I come from, country that I come from, is that is not for all homes, but for most homes. So when I moved here to have this job, I had to apply to get a derogation because I was sent by the Danish state, so I could stay I could keep my apartment. But actually, if I'd just gotten a normal job in another country, I would have had to either rent it out or sell it. I couldn't just have it. And you cannot just buy a normal apartment in Copenhagen and keep it and nobody lives there. It has to be the first home of somebody. In most cases, not all, but in most cases. It would be too far-reaching if we in Brussels decided that this is something for all countries to do. On the other hand, I will say that when people point fingers at me and say, Commissioner, why don't you do anything to make sure that we don't have empty houses? Well, here's the toolbox. Here's what you can do if you want to. But we do also need to look at taxes, at least, even if we don't want to decide from Brussels. I think it is our obligation when making the analysis to also look at, okay, what are the best practices then, and what could be, with our experts' advisement, what could you then actually do as a member state if you want to use tax measures to help remedy some of these situations. On harmonization of rules and making sure that we simplify, We've already talked quite a bit on that, so I don't know if I have that much to add. I will say though that on nature protection, I'm very well aware that there can often be trade-offs. This is also something that we see in the other part of my portfolio, in the energy sector, that when we want to make it easier and faster to build, whether it's an energy plant or it's new housing, then some of the rules that make it hardest is usually rules that are there to protect our environment and nature. So therefore, we need to be quite mindful when we simplify. I certainly will argue that we can do it, and just as we've proposed to do it in the energy side with our grid package, we also here in this package propose to look broadly on all of the different rules that are today making it difficult and slow to see what we can do, but of course maintaining our focus to protect our environment and our nature.
Thank you very much. Now we start our second round of questions based on the Catch the Eye. I already have a long list of requests. In this case, MEPs have 1 minute for the question. Questions will be grouped, and then I give the floor back to the Commissioner for the answers. And we start with Borja Jiménez-Ras for EPP.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let me begin with the areas where we clearly share the same diagnosis, because Europe is facing a deep and structural housing supply crisis. This is what we consider. So we therefore welcome the strong focus of the plan on increasing supply, on improving productivity in the construction sector, on innovation through new building methods and materials, and on addressing labour shortages and skill gaps. And we also agree that public funding alone will never be sufficient, that we need to mobilize also the private investment. Simplification is another key point of convergence, and this is clear, and this is well recognized in the plan. And on short-term rentals, we must insist. We defend a balanced and proportionate approach based on reliable data sensitive to local and regional realities and designed to empower local authorities. You have talked also about the empty houses, 20% you say, so we need more data about this, because the question is that in Spain we also have this debate, but there is something quite clear, that most part of these houses are in places where people don't want to live, in rural areas, and this is a reality, so we need more data on this. Speculation, more transparency. What you propose from our perspective is perfect, but we have to be very careful. And you know that we are now fully involved in the negotiations, and my question is very clear. So how does the Commission intend to consider the Parliament's ongoing work when this is approved finally? I hope that this will be in March. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now give the floor to Alicia Homs-Ginel for S&D.
Yes, I will do it in Spanish. Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, and thank you for coming to the Housing Committee and for taking part in these debates. And as Andrea said, for setting out the affordable housing plan, which we're discussing today. I wanted to ask about this idea of an affordable housing house. I think this is really going to be key to help to solve citizens' concerns, and I think that it's a very good measure. But I just want to know what kind of, well, on the criteria that you were referring to, what kind of vision do you have? Because the example that you gave to try to do something about short stay housing, but I wanted to focus more on protecting residents. If someone comes from wherever they come from and they want to stay in a certain city, you know, and they have a third or fourth house, we know that certain houses are empty. That's something that does exist. So first houses where people actually live, have to be prioritized. And then just to finish, I mean, I always say this, but please take account of the specific challenges of vulnerable areas such as islands, for example, which are extremely vulnerable and can't extend their housing too much more. Thank you.
Or to Isabelle Kalinec for EPP.
Oui, merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here, Commissioner. Thank you for this constant dialogue. There's a few things I'd like to clarify. What is the time frame for your work? What will be a regulation and what will be a directive in what you've announced? And what committees will be involved? You know that we're a special committee, of course. And what about cohesion funding and InvestEU in the CFP for the coming period? Can I ask also about the definitions? What's the different definitions that you have for social housing and affordable housing? That's very important for France. So we think you're going to maintain the same rules for social housing, but there's going to be a new quality label for affordable housing. We in France have social housing, but we also have something that's called intermediate housing. All of these different categories have different funding rules. So I think the Commission needs to be very clear in the treatment of each category so that operators are not harmed in any way.
Now I give the floor to Oyan Adirroitia Martinez. I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, it's perfect. Thank you so much. I'm speaking in Spanish. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's a pleasure to start this year's work on housing. This is one of the key concerns of our citizens, and we have a very positive view of the plan that you've presented. It is very much in line with measures that we're working on in the Basque Country, reducing bureaucracy, increasing supply, doing something about empty houses, and ensuring that we have affordable housing as well, because even a lot of the middle class, they don't meet the criteria for social housing, but they can't afford to buy houses either, or they don't meet the criteria. They're very far down on the list for social housing. And so I would just like to focus a little bit on the European Investment Platform. We are also trying to work on creating public-private funding at regional level. And I'm just wondering whether, as well as the European Investment Bank, you're also looking at other types of technical or economic support, or other types of cooperation between, for example, funds that are set up at regional or local level and funds that might be set up at European level. Thank you.
Now I give the floor to Maravilla Sabadia Hover de EPP.
Muchas gracias y gracias, señor.
Thank you, Commissioner, for being available and for telling us about this plan, which is long awaited. It is urgently needed, but we are too late and we mustn't waste time. Otherwise, what is put forward will be obsolete. Now, you've really focused on the major issues of our time, but I want to focus on lack of workforce, because there's not enough people working in construction. We need to invest in human capital. Now, a lot of what you're focusing on is on reducing red tape, and by 2027 we need to have sped things up considerably. But it's not just about dealing with red tape. We have to come up with the necessary funding. So would you say a bit more about the funding side of things? So the current and immediate funding, but also the next MFF, including the social fund.
Muchas gracias, Maravillas. Now I give the floor to Marco Vesligai for SND.
Hvala predsjednice. Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, I will be brief. Your plan focuses on the existing instruments without any concrete measures for affordable housing. I would like to see more measures for different rural areas and for the youth. We talked about empty apartments, but we should also talk about empty houses in rural areas with poor energy performance, which have to be reconstructed completely. This is an issue that in Croatia is significant. There's also legal issues connected to it, so we should have a clear support and clear framework from EU member states, and also clear rules for local and regional areas. So I think you should also take this into account when it comes to family houses, not just city apartments.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Georgios Aftias for EPP.
Dear colleagues, I will talk to Greek. Κύριε Επίτροπε, έχετε έρθει αρκετές φορές στην Ελλάδα και έχετε δει ότι τρέχει.
Colleagues.
Έχω μπροστά μου το σχέδιό σας.
On page 11, I'm looking at your plan. So we've got a new European platform for affordable housing, a pan-European platform, and the national and regional development banks are supposed to be contributing 375 billion by 2029. Is that right? So 13.8 billion per country? That's one thing. Another is that there's opportunities for governments when it comes to taxation of added value and short-term developments there, so 20% when it comes to VAT. And then when it comes to the local level, there's a mention of houses. Could you give us an overview of that?
Thank you very much. Now give the floor to Maria Zaccaria for the non-screen.
Σας ευχαριστώ, κυρία Πρόεδρε. Κύριε Επίτροπε, κυρία...
Chair, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, first of all, I'd like to start by wishing you all a Happy New Year. Now, when it comes to the housing plan that we've just heard about from the Commissioner, I see that the plan is focusing on housing supply. However, there's another side to the issue, which is also causing problems for housing, and that is forced housing sales, expropriation of houses. I think that's also something that we need to talk about. We also have to talk about the right to housing, which is provided for in the European Charter. We have to ensure that people's primary residence is protected. What we need to avoid is that if we build houses, then they are left empty. And then at the same time, there are citizens losing their houses because they haven't got enough money or because of the banks. I'm a member of the Petitions Committee as well, and we receive a lot of petitions recently. We've had petitions from a number of different countries, including Greek petitions. And they have, and also petitions from Cyprus. And I'm sure that this is also the case in other European countries as well, that this phenomenon exists, where houses are seized and there are forced sales. I think that we have to ensure that we have protection of a primary residence as really the founding basis before we go any further.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor back to the Commissioner for the reply.
Thank you. So a lot of you asked about funding. So quite often, the last year, I've heard that the EU is not really providing any substantial funding for housing. But when you add it up, actually under this MFF, the EU has provided 43 billion for housing. That is quite substantial amounts, also because these are not just €1 that is then spent and then that's it. These are €1 that then generate, of course, much bigger amounts when they're actually put to work. Furthermore, of course, we then have the new possibilities under the Cohesion Fund, and there will also be extra money under the InvestEU possibility. So things are happening, things have happened, but we also want to make sure that in the future member states have more flexibility and can use a larger share of the money that they get from the EU for housing purposes. And this is also something that President von der Leyen made quite clear when she put forward our proposal for the next MFF, which is to provide these opportunities in the national circumstances and the national plans. The 375 billion are the amount that is being planned by all of these banks. So this doesn't mean that everything is via the pan-European investment platform, but it means that this is what our collaborators, these banks, are planning to use. We, of course, want as much as possible via our plan when it makes sense. And I do think that we are well on the way with making a platform that will make a very real difference. I'm not able to yet give you the exact time frame and which committees will be involved. It's too early to say yet. We will have, of course, the state aid rules, my colleague Ribera. We will have the Affordable Housing Act that I will put forward, working together also with my colleague Sessionet on the short-term rentals. It's important to underline, a few of you have asked about the concretes in that plan also, that for the short-term rentals, the examples that I mentioned wasn't, of course, examples of something that we will force anybody to use. It's something that they can use. So it's like a positive list of things that you can do. So, for instance, if you want to say, well, you're only allowed to have short-term rentals here during the summertime, or you want an exception to say that it is only allowed for a few months, but it's allowed for students all year because there's specific needs for students, then that's a possibility. We know of some places that, as far as I'm being told, that have done that. Then, of course, there's also the differentiation between professional and non-professional hosts. If you are a professional host, then clearly this is a business model. Okay, maybe some cities want that, but in other cities, certainly that is a big part of the problem. Then that it's become professionalized. So this is where they then buy whole buildings, throw people out, and then just have short-term rentals. Which is, in my opinion, not a very, very good model, and definitely part of the problem many places. On the lack of skilled labor, that is definitely something that we do need to take very serious in our construction sector, in our societies as a whole, but definitely also in our construction sector. So we're also working in the Commission, of course, to do whatever we can with together with the Minsatu. I think we are making progress also there, and I hope very much this is something that you will also reflect in your report. And to the question, what will happen to your report? Well, hopefully it'll be full of good ideas that we can also implement. As I said earlier, the fact that I have put forward our plan now is not to say that that is then set in stone and we will not do anything else. Of course, we very much hope that there's still good ideas, and I'm sure there will be from this house that we can work on. The original plan was to wait and have your report first, and then reflect those input in mind. But we've because of the necessity and because of the demand and because it's so clear that we expected to act, we thought, okay, we're ready to present it now, so let's do it now. Let's not wait for institutional reasons. Let's actually do it now when we can. But just to underline, that doesn't mean that we're not that I'm not very eager to listen to your input from the report. Also, of course, that indicates where the majority in the Parliament is on some of the issues that we are also discussing today, where clearly there's some disagreement. Well, okay, then it will be put to the vote, and we will also see then what has the opportunity and possibility of actually becoming law if we decide so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. This was a very intense and, I think, useful exchange. So thank you for your usual availability. We've really appreciated the cooperation with you, and I'm sure it will continue. So thank you very, very much.